once again. We hope we didn't keep you waiting much for a long time. We were just waiting for our attendees to join. So without further delay, I would like to welcome you and to introduce Dr. Arawi, who doesn't need an introduction, but of course, if anyone's new to our webinar series, we'd like to introduce you. Dr. Thalia Arawi is the founding director of the Salim Al-Hus Bioethics and Professionalism Program at the American University of Beirut, Faculty of Medicine and Medical Center. The SHBPP is the first and only regional bioethics and professionalism program in the Arab region, and was recently announced as the first WHO collaborating center for ethics in the Arab region. Dr. Arawi is the first Arab to specialize in bioethics. She is also the clinical bioethicist and clinical ethics consultant and certified healthcare mediator at ABMC. She's also the first Arab member to be appointed on the board of the International Association of Bioethics and is also a member of the American Society of Bioethics, Canadian Society of Bioethics, and the Provincial Health Ethics Network, and the UK Clinical Ethics Network, the Lebanese National Advisory Commission of Ethics in Life Science and Healthcare, not to mention but a few. Dr. Arawi is also the founding member and advisory board member of the Bioethics Network on Women's Issues in the Arab region and has been elected as the first chair of the network. She has also been elected as a senior fellow at the Global Foundation for the Advancement of Ethical and Scientific rigor in research at the GA2P2. Excuse me. She's also been promoted to a senior fellow. She's also the senior fellow to the Center of Disaster and Humanitarian Ethics at GA2P2 and the first Arab consultant at the Center for Conflict Resolution in Healthcare, Memphis, Tennessee, and a member of the WHO COVID-19 Ethics Working Group. Dr. Arawi is also a member of the WeCope, World Emergency COVID Pandemic Ethics Committee, and has participated in a multitude of national, regional, and international conferences on bioethics. So without further ado, Dr. Arawi, we welcome you
Diana.
As a speaker this time, and may have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear. I'm trying to fix something on my PC that it's saying there are lots of windows open, although I don't have many windows open, but again. Anyway, is this clear?
Yes, we can see your screen and hear you clearly.
Okay, perfect. I'm trying to remove the video. I can't from my side. If Thalia can do that, that would be great.
Okay. Yes, I removed it.
You removed it? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, طيب. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, ironically. But I think it's important for us to share what's happening around us. And this is my presentation for today. I'll try to be succinct. I'll try to be respectful of time. And this is precisely why you will notice that some other issues that need to be noted will not be noted due to time constraints. So my initial disclaimer is the painting of Magritte, Ceci n'est pas une pipe, which is to say that AI in healthcare is a very important thing that we are facing and we cannot brush aside any longer. And because everyone or almost everyone knows the importance of AI and integrating AI in healthcare, this is one thing I will not be discussing. I want to show things from another perspective. But first, very quickly, for those who are not very much familiar with what's happening, I hope this video will help you appreciate what's happening.
Number 2, the advent of AI in healthcare.
In this age of technology, artificial intelligence knows no bounds. Once thought a futuristic threat to humankind, AI is changing and saving lives. Not intended to replace clinicians or clinical judgment, AI serves the purpose to enhance and complement the very human interaction of provider and patient. In healthcare, AI is changing the game with its applications in decision support, image analysis, and patient triage. With their ability to reduce variation and duplicate testing, decision support systems quickly decipher large amounts of data within the electronic medical record. AI technology is also taking the uncertainty out of viewing patient scans by highlighting problem areas on images, aiding in the screening and diagnosis process. Artificial intelligence helps with the issue of physician burnout by collecting patient data via an app or text messaging. Chatbots now ask patients a series of questions regarding their symptoms, taking the guesswork out of self-diagnosis and saving both the patient and provider time and money. With the AI integration, working smarter enables solutions to a variety of issues for patients, hospitals, and the healthcare industry.
So this is only very briefly what AI or the integration of AI into healthcare can offer. So applications, as you've seen, such as imaging, diagnostics, and surgery, will transform the patient-clinician relationship inevitably. And the big question is, who are the players in this big game? And you can now know the players, or perhaps you already know them: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and IBM, among others, of course. For example, Google just used recently a DeepMind using AI, which is used to predict retinal disease progression. We also know that AI is used in assisted robotic surgeries. They analyze data from medical records and they help physicians during the surgery, which leads to fewer complications and lesser hospital stays. That's very quickly. We also have the M gene, which helps in diagnosis. It can recognize so far at least 4 serious life-threatening disease like the George, Down, William, and Dawn, with an accuracy that is over 90%. And lots of other applications. You have a blood pressure tracker, you have a pulse rate monitor, you have a system that checks your health, you have a virtual doctor, you have even x-rays that you can use by introducing certain applications on your phone. What's also very interesting is that artificial intelligence is also playing an important role in the pharma industry. And Roche, Merck, Sanofi, AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmith, and Pfizer, and others have already started working with AI. This technology will predict efficacy and safety of a new molecule within a biological system following the discovery of that system. It will also predict therapeutic area the molecule may be successful in, and it will identify any secondary life cycle opportunities for molecule. But of course, one major difference between a human being and an AI or a humanoid is that while we lack memory, they lack the faculty of understanding, the consciousness that we have as human beings. And this is the main idea that was raised by Alan Turing long time ago. Alan Turing and his Turing test tried to see whether machines can think like human. Now, clearly, this is happening at a rapid pace. We started probably without being aware that this is part of what's happening with the ATM machines, with the autopilot, with the little tiny computer games that we used to play when we were children, but it's a rapid pace and it really requires continued vigilance from healthcare workers. So AI is here and you might as well get used to it. Now, what we are using, and this is an example of an electronic health record that we use at AUB, it's called EPIC. So most information about patients, at least the information that we can include, are available online. However, the question remains as to whether we are reducing human beings to a series of algorithms and binaries, as opposed to the humane human being, if you wish, as predicted or as portrayed by Leonardo da Vinci in his Vitruvian Man, which includes all kinds of disciplines and human, if you want, angles, if you wish. So AI is here. We cannot ignore that. But the question is, the important question, at least as far as I'm concerned, is what are some of the ethical concerns that arise as far as AI and healthcare is concerned? So, of course, one of the biggest issues that we worry about is confidentiality and privacy, particularly in the presence of big data. Big data is available not only in healthcare records, of course, in electronic healthcare records, they are available now. That's why we have WebEx, for example, for free. And we all know in this neoliberal world, nothing is for free. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all these actually are collecting data, whether we like it or not. The GPS is collecting data, our phone is collecting data, everything is collecting data. The quality of care is an issue that might be very much compromised, and we cannot expect a robot to be empathetic towards others or towards patients. The issue of safety is extremely important. Once IBM Watson for oncology used AI algorithm, but gave unsafe and incorrect recommendation for cancer treatment. The concern that we face is fragmented healthcare. Already with the numerous subspecialties that we have, although our clinicians all over the world are by definition conscientious and want the best for their patient, unfortunately, sometimes this over-specialization and lack of coordination due to time constraints is leading to a fragmented healthcare. Accessibility. Will this increase the gap between the haves and the have-nots? Some hospitals will be able, for example, to afford the new technology, others will not. Some patients will be capable of affording that new technology, and other patients will not. What will the relationship with the rest of the medical team be? The issue of informed consent. How can we ensure informed consent when we are working with humanoids or if you want, bionic systems? Who is going to govern all this new hype, if you wish, or this artificial intelligence in healthcare? Where will it be centralized? Will this be a political centralization? There's also risk of fraud. There's the risk of unemployment, since machines are going to take over a lot of the work, particularly managerial work and secretarial work that is done by humans. There's the potential of abuse, both scientific and political. A typical example is collecting information about a certain population, the genetic makeup of a certain population, and probably developing a biological virus, if you wish. Indeed, bias, and I'll come to that later, Kamen. Malpractice relation between cyber doctor and patients is a big issue. Who's going to be responsible? How can we guarantee cybersecurity? But most important of all, my question is, can a robot make moral decisions? Can he or she or it be held accountable? What are the factors in particular of accountable? Factors in particulars of each patient, which are not only biological, but psychosocial, spiritual, cultural, legal, and financial, need usually to be factored in whenever we are working with patients. Can a robot actually do that? So the big question is, can we trust them? So the issue is not whether machines can think, with all due respect to Alan Turing, but whether they can actually feel or react or have empathy. I noted the issue of bias a while ago. For example, this is an AI mechanism that collects personal information of around 1.2 billion people, and it leaked in massive data breach. In certain studies, it put women's lives at risk because there was a bias. At other studies that were done, we have, when they were doing an IA experiment on ATM cards, it was discovered that the ATM machine, the newest form of the ATM machine, is by definition discriminating against women and allowing them less money than men. Also, AI recruiting tools showed bias against women. And of course, we have stolen data by cyber attacks and hacking of systems. So I'm going to share three main issues here and go a little bit into more detail. You all know this probably. This is Sophie, the humanoid. She wanted a baby at one point. She noted that she would like to have a baby. She has, by the way, been offered the Saudi citizenship while in Saudi Arabia. So the Hanson Robotics, who actually created Sophie, gave her that baby, and you can see the baby on the other side of the screen. But this baby is not just a baby for Sophie. He is supposed to make STEM, coding, and an AI fun to learn for students. But again, Sophie wanted a sister. So here's her sister. She is a cyber nurse, if you wish, or a humanoid nurse. She visits with people and brightens their day with AI simulation. She talks therapy. She takes bio readings. She helps healthcare providers. But Grace, the sister of Sophie, is a humanoid. Again, because of what's happening in the world, fragmentation of family life, dispersing of families because of, if you want, immigration, wars, and others. People are being left alone. So a Japan toy maker developed a robotic grandchild for every elderly. There are big question marks surrounding this, particularly when you come from this part of the world, but we'll leave this to another time. Now the new trend is to introduce brain simulators to beat disorders like depression and Parkinson's, a brain chip to improve multitasking and happiness, and augmented eyes that can detect liars, and ear implants for super hearing. So some of them are superb, some of them are scary. Of course, the main issue is who gets to get them, who gets to implant them, who gets to monitor them, and other issues. Even symphonies like that of Beethoven, his 10th symphony that was left unfinished for 2 centuries was completed by an AI. I tried to make you listen to a second of it. Well done, by the way. So very quickly, just to give you a taste. So with the advancement of technology and medical technology in particular, and genomics and genetics and CRISPR and transhumanism and the notion of singularity and what have you, the big question that we ask ourselves is whether we are playing God, and if we are playing God, at what risk, at what cost as well. The second story I'd like to discuss is a statement that was given basically made by Pablo Picasso, the painter, and also attributed to David Hume, the 16th century philosopher, who said that everything you can imagine is real. On the top of the page, you see the first invention, if you wish, of a chimera that was made by Greek mythology and available in Homer's Odyssey. Below, you see 2 women, Hera and Nephili. Hera is a Greek goddess, of course. Nephili is her clone. So we are talking here ancient Greek mythology, but they were already developed. In Hezoids, for example, Talos was created, who is a humanoid to protect the city, and he is made of iron. And other muses were made also, who are humanoids to protect and surround the city. Not long ago, we've probably seen a film, you've probably seen it, it's called I, Robot. It's a superb film that is based on a real story by Ashnikov, I think. And it's supposed to follow the rules of what robotics should do. But it ends up overturning human beings. So the question is, if everything we can imagine is real, will we reach a time when our humanity is going to be, if you want, diminished, and we will be ruled by robots? If we had a magic powder or something to throw in the air, this is how the world would look like, and even actually more. We are all connected via Wi-Fi, via internet, via GPS, clouds, and what have you. So it's a magnetic field beyond imagination. Ray-Ban just introduced new glasses that can take pictures and videos without consent, of course, or with consent. We all know the issue or the new development of an iWatch, but iWatch are becoming even more interesting and even more controlling. They can tell you your health, they can depict any health diseases, and they can transmit this information to whoever you want. And there was a talk, as I'm sure you know, about inserting a chip subcutaneously that will include your medical record to be used ideally for good purposes, which is in case you travel and you don't have access to your medical record and you have a certain emergency, it can be accessed via a click if you wish. The worst scenario that we can imagine is healthcare turning into a simple machinery. In other words, the lack of human touch, which, as you all know, is perhaps the most important thing in healing. And this was very well explained by Abraham Verghese. We cannot do without the human touch. None of us. We all need to have physical exams. Actually, it leads to less errors. And we need to feel those who are caring for us nearby, if you wish. Now, to go back to Picasso's statement, everything I can imagine is true or can happen. I'm sure at least some of you who witnessed the 1970s famous $6 million man, Steve Austin, and he has an accident, and then they give him a bionic eye. He can see everything as if he had binoculars. He has a robotic hand that can destroy anything, and he has quick legs because also they are made as the legs of a robot. But that's 1970s. However, recently, this young man, Rob Spence, was playing in his garden. I think he was trying to use his pistol. His eyes, actually not a real pistol, but I really, for that point, somehow the details are becoming fuzzy. But anyway, he lost his eye. Now they inserted an eye in his skull. He can use it upon request whenever he wants to take images and videos and recordings while simply looking, and it becomes red. And he's actually a film producer. In Cairo, not long time ago, we have seen the first, if you wish, hologram bringing the iconic Egyptian singer Kulthum in concert. This is all nice and dandy, and people were happy, but what is this actually? Do we really know what is happening around us? Which brings me to the third story, the metaverse. We are all giving our courses online, or at least when the first 2 years, 2019, 2020 of COVID has started, we resorted to online learning. The question is, I wonder whether this was our Metaverse 101 introductory course, where everything takes place via the screen. We all know that there are new machines that are taking place that can make you see things in three-dimensionally or four-dimensionally if you want. You can touch things that you cannot see. You can dissect, work in an anatomy lab without actually touching the body. You can do all these things, which have good points and bad points, albeit virtually. The digital presence. So I tried to have 3 digital me's, as you can see. And the 3 digital me's are different. But my question here is whether we have a post-mortem or posthumous digital self or presence. Through all these applications, once a person dies, he or she remains, whether we like it or not. So are there digital souls? Anyone can use the images. Emails are there posthumously. So something remains after death, which is probably not a good thing or probably a good thing. It depends on how you see it. Now, this is one of the newest inventions that to some are bothering, to others are not. But this, if you want, organization decided to resurrect the dead in a virtual form. So like Kulthum's hologram. This is a mother that reunites with her deceased child.
What is
In the 21st century, ghosts do exist. After 4 years, she can see her again. She can hear her again. But as hard as she tries, Jang Ji-sung can't touch her dead daughter, Nayeon. For this is a digital recreation of the girl who died from leukemia in 2016, aged 7. Just pixels in a headset and a voice in some headphones. Meeting her daughter's avatar has been a complex and deeply emotional experience for this grieving mother.
If Nayeon were alive, she would now be 11 years old, and it's heartbreaking to see that her time has stopped at the age of 7. But
I'm not going to present all of it, but that's the point. Some find this very nice, others find this painful. But the whole idea is bringing a human being back to life in a virtual form, and the consequences of such, if you want, development. Scientists are also talking, and people, mechanical engineers are also talking about the development of robo-doctors. This is how we are because of this, these inventions. For example, whenever you walk with your phone, with your iPhone, with your iWatch, I mean, and with the cameras all around you, we are under constant surveillance. So the idea of privacy does not hold anymore, unfortunately, these days. And it will be worse as we move on. Now, of course, things are closer than they appear they are. Maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, Zuckerberg, who founded Facebook, actually declared that Facebook will change its name and it will become actually Meta. And this is the sign of infinity, if you wish, which is an introduction to the Metaverse. The Metaverse is a world on its own, and human beings are expected, and it's worth talking about this at great length at one point, are expected to live within this Metaverse, which brings to mind Putnam's experiments of whether we are actually a brain in a vat or not. In this Metaverse, the Bitcoin will be used, so you can purchase whatever you want, you can collect money, and you do this all with a Bitcoin. And Bitcoin has started operating anyway, particularly in developed countries. There's a Metaverse market. These are not things to be, these are things that are already there. Many have already started opening their shops and chains and what have you for a Metaverse setting. And interestingly enough, Chan Zuckerberg's also developed a biohub. Now, the reason I find this fascinating is that the inventor of Facebook, who's not a scientist, who's not a biologist, who's not a physician, who's not a researcher, actually created a biohub, the mission of which is to support the science and tech that will make it possible to cure, prevent, and manage all forms of diseases by the end of the century. So it has to do with diseases, developing technology to lead to diagnostic and therapies, and they have already mapped and annotated gene expression in more than 1 million cells, and more to come, of course. All this makes me think of Stephen Hawking's statement a long time ago. The real risk with AI isn't malice, but it's competence. A super intelligent AI will be extremely good at accomplishing its goals. And if those goals aren't aligned with ours, we are in trouble. You are probably not an evil ant hater who steps on ants out of malice. But if you are in charge of a hydroelectric green energy project and there's an anthill in the region to be flooded, too bad for the ants. Let's not place humanity in the position of those ants. So Facebook, avatars, smartphones, smart TVs, what have you, there's much more than actually meets the eye. We need to look at things from a different perspective and to try to appreciate things from a different perspective. I am not saying AI is the worst thing that could happen. Perhaps it is a magical thing that is happening in medicine, but it also has, unfortunately, its evil side of the coin. This is Nietzsche and Einstein. Akid, I added Nietzsche's face. It's not his face. They were different times. But Nietzsche said modernity is dangerous when it stops questioning itself. And I wonder whether we did stop questioning ourselves. We take things for granted. We take AI for granted. We take, and we look forward for a car that travels, for a robot that will take the history of a patient. But maybe we should stop and question ourselves for a while. And as Einstein himself said, I believe that the abominable deterioration of ethical standards stems primarily from the mechanization and depersonalization of our lives, a disastrous byproduct of science and technology. we are to blame. Strakulpa. So AI is here to stay. It's a wonderful thing, maybe, but it also turns matters upside down. So the question that I will close with is whether this is a utopia or a dystopia. Thank you for being patient. And I'm happy to receive any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dr. Arawi. It was definitely a very eye-opening and session, and we have so many questions right now. We welcome any questions from the audience, whoever or would like to pose a question or comment even. I think we have something in the chat already from Dr. Ismail Laher. So they has several comments. Should medical education as we currently deliver it be changed, and at what level and how?
Can you repeat that, please? Sorry, I was trying to stop the sharing of my screen. Okay.
Sure, no worries. Should medical education as we currently deliver it be changed, at what level and how?
Okay, so this is a very important question, and I intended to have a slide or two on that, but because of time, I did not. The easiest and simplest answer to this is that AI being what it is and the role it's playing and going to play, it has to be eventually, actually from now, introduced into the medical curriculum. What does AI do? How do we deal with it? What are the ethical concerns that you have to pay attention to? And not only ethical concerns, sometimes what is ethical is inhumane. So we have to decide as human beings what decision we make. And in medical education, this definitely has to be integrated.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we have another comment from Dr. Laher. Robots lack conscientiousness and therefore cannot be found guilty. And the manufacturers will have an escape clause. I think this was with regard to the accountability issue that you raised at some point.
So I don't think that's a question. I think that's a comment from Professor Laher. Yeah. Indeed, they not only they do not have consciousness, they do not have conscience. And thus responsibility and freedom of choice. It's basically our freedom that make us responsible. So that's a very important area we're going to, if you want, discuss as time goes by and as developments become even quicker, if you wish.
Yes, of course, and this I think puts into question, I mean, who will set the rules? And I mean, the people developing the robots are different than the people who are involved in healthcare themselves, maybe, and the overlap, there'd be a great gap to fill, I think.
Now, you see, Diana, the problem with artificial intelligence and what's happening around the world, like, for example, us using WebEx now and us having a Facebook account. For example, I want so much to cancel my Facebook account. And then I realize if I do that, there's a plethora of information that I will not have access to, because particularly I'm subscribed to a number of journals, a number of societies. And if I do that, I'm going to be out of the loop. Indirectly, we are forced to use something and accept the rules that are given to us from somewhere else, if you want, from Silicon Valley. The same thing applies for WebEx. WebEx is free. We need to use it for education, as is the case with Zoom or Microsoft Teams or what have you, because we cannot not do that. Although we feel that we want to get away from technology and go back to the old days, as we say, we just cannot anymore. So we are entangled, we are chained, and whatever we do will have effects on our behavior, eventually on our future as well.
I have one little last question, please.
Tfadal, Dr. Laher.
So do you think robots or AI devices will actually become referring physicians to specialists, so that they will take the place of of family doctors, general practitioners, and they will become devices that will send you to the specialist. So basically what it means is that doctors don't need patients anymore. You're a patient of the machine, and the machine will refer you to the next level of medical care.
Professor Lara, unfortunately, and this is also a very challenging question, unfortunately, from the literature that I've been reading and the research that I've been doing for this presentation in particular, it seems that this is the plan. Not all physicians will be robo-doctors, but there is a new, if you want, a new track to develop robots who are going to be doctors instead of actual doctors. Most of the work that doctors do can be replaced, as far as I'm reading, by AI. And this is one thing that makes it extremely, perhaps scary from my perspective. And I think also, if I may, with all humility, it might eventually, depends how we work on it, mark the demise of medicine as we know it, perhaps mark the demise of humanity as we know it. But I think one main reason that led to that is the new post-World War II, if you wish, education system that honors the sciences and dishonors the humanities. The more we shy away from humanities, as is usually in most medical schools, the less we grow this human, cultured, empathetic side in us.
Thank you. I think, yes, we have another question in the chat from Dr. I'm not sure, Arja Aru. How can ethicists have a role in influencing the development of the use of AI? And can we show and influence more the existing bias in the data used for algorithms concerning gender, minorities, etc.?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Arja, for this question. So the mere question, how can ethicists have a role, implies that you believe that they do have a role, but we need to implement it, which is actually the case. And perhaps, luckily, if I may, recently, for the last 1 decade or so, major health organizations have become familiar or have actually admitted the importance of having ethicists on board. The WHO now, for example, is leading a number of projects that have to do with health, telemedicine, COVID-19 vaccine, and what have you. And there's always a group of ethicists that analyzes the situation, projects the dangers that might happen, the breaches that might happen, come up with recommendations and white papers, are invited to share these with the scientists, if you wish. If you were to ask me, we have a moral obligation not to stay silent. We have a moral obligation to speak up. Eventually, it's our life. If not our life, the life of our children and grandchildren. So being out there, being part of it, being vocal, using your pen, using your voice, using your rational skills and logic to show, not necessarily to say we don't want AI, because AI helps in many ways, but at least to set some limits. I hope I answered you.
Okay, we have also another question. I think the follow-up question was, is there any data bias with the AI? How is the AI going to be trained? I think that's also an important.
Okay, so that's quite a complicated question, whether not only whether it can be actually trained, but basically they follow certain mechanical commands, if you wish, and it's a matter of training. It's a matter of data input, if you want, more than anything else. And this is the work of the actual mechanical engineers who respond or meet or discuss with the ethicists about these issues and how to correct them. And data bias, definitely, same argument. Where these happen, they have been stopped. And I'm sure they have been stopped in order to revise the invention or the creation all over again.
Mhm. I mean, just a simple example of how algorithms can be biased. We see it in very basic forms in our social media, where it's been, I mean, brought up with regards to politics, how certain maybe views are projected more than others, or given preference over others. So yes, this definitely opens a big or poses a big question mark on how algorithms will work. And
particularly because they are centralized in one place or one or two places. And which means it's another political power that is arising. It will eradicate all kinds of powers. Real power and wars and money, if you wish, are all here in the metaverse, are all in artificial intelligence. It's probably we should wish we can go back to the times of the sword, but unfortunately we are developing, at times we are developing backwards.
so yeah, which brings us to the next question from Mr. Hadi Arawi. How can we protect patients' privacy with AI? As AI moves from research to application, it could become increasingly difficult to keep genetic and clinical data anonymous.
Exactly. That's the most important problem that we face in AI when it plays a role in healthcare. And this problem is already there with the electronic health records. The electronic health records is not, unfortunately, as safe as paper records used to be because it's centralized in a machine and linked to a cloud, and anyone can actually have access to it. So privacy, unfortunately, I always say this after, I've been saying this for a while, real privacy does not exist anymore. With this modern world, there's no such thing as privacy. We might try to protect some form of confidentiality, but when AIs take over and collect information from millions and millions and millions of human beings without necessarily their consent, privacy will not, unfortunately, be actually respected.
So
Yes.
I think we have another comment from Professor Laher. I suppose that the source codes for the AI machines can be customized to local populations, etc. So can it help with the effect of the social determinants of health?
Okay, Kamal, very interesting question. It can, yes. Will it? I don't know. It depends. It depends who actually is, if you want, the puppeteer using this puppet in a way. So if I am one of those well-known developed countries who possess everything that is related to medical technology, I can certainly do that and affect the social determinants of health. But I can also use it in a negative way. And this brings me back to the idea that I raised earlier on, which is the political usage of the information that we have to relieve the social determinants of health or to aggravate them. So the main issue is not everything we can do, we should do. And a thing as such is not evil or wrong by and in itself. It is how we human beings decide to use it and apply it and make use of it.
Doctor, if I may, I'm just wondering now that you mentioned regulation. We know that historically, when we've had in medicine and scientific advances that happened on a large scale, there were conventions that came out and international guidelines that were agreed upon. And since this is already happening, I mean, it's here, like you said, AI is here. It's not something in the future anymore. Have there been any any attempts, or are there any regulations, or the conversation that is happening, has it materialized into anything of that sort to regulate and guide the what's coming?
Yes. Thank you, Diana, for this. Yes, there has been conferences and regulations. The UNESCO, for example, released a very interesting document. But this is all nice the main issue that I'm concerned with is not whether there are actually any regulations available, whether these regulations will be respected, and if they were not respected, are those who breached them accountable for what they did? So it goes back to several issues related to bias, power, and what have you. But yes, a lot is being spoken about the ethics of AI. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, not long time ago, May, the Prime Minister of England said that we expect to cure most of the population by 2033 because of AI. But you also noted that what we are looking for is ethical AI.
Okay. So I guess this is like following up on the same issue of regulatory agencies monitoring the conduct and behaviors of health professionals. However, how would this be implemented for AI? I think you addressed this.
Yes, one additional comment, Diana, if I may. Who are the regulatory agencies? So that's a big question. Who is in charge of governance? That's another big question. What's the agenda? What's the plan? So will it be positively played for the entire globe, including third world countries? We even have now four world countries, if you wish. The displaced, what we call also the people who can simply be forgotten in a form of biopolitics à la Foucault, if you wish. The disposables. But definitely no medical school should offer a curriculum without talking about AI, the positive points of AI, the dangers of AI. There should be a collaboration between physicians, medical students, and biological and medical engineers at the institution, because we cannot really find ourselves all of a sudden in front of all this without having been prepared to it. Things change quite rapidly.
That's true.
Indeed, issues of conflict of interest between manufacturers and users, absolutely.
So if anyone would like to ask a question, you can also unmute yourselves or raise your hand. And yes, I think we mentioned iRobot. You mentioned it, Doctor, in the presentation.
Yes. How far do I think we as humanity are? Not that far, if I may say. The way things are happening now, you go to Bank Audi, for example, here in Lebanon, you have a robot that welcomes you. Okay. I remember once I was, interestingly enough, 10 years ago when I was in the States, I was at the supermarket and I got my grocery and I wanted to pay at the cashiers. And they told me this is self-checkout. What is self-checkout? I've never heard of this. And it turns out that I do that on my own, putting using the scan. So there are no people working there anymore. Things are getting out of control because we are being controlled by machines. We are being controlled by social media. I mean, it's amazing, even in law, even when it comes to crimes, you cannot trust anything anymore because of technology, because you can rebuild a picture, you can rebuild a voice. Really, nothing is what it seems. The main question that worries me is what happens to a very essential concept that is at the center of human relationship, which is the concept of trust.
I think that the very human, I mean, maybe the human nature in itself is changing, because I'm thinking right now about, I mean, you're asking these questions and voicing these concerns. Maybe this is they seem irrelevant for this generation, but the upcoming generations that are already growing up with all of this in this metaverse, they might not see these disadvantages anymore. So they won't see anything wrong with all of this. So I think this is where, as well, like you said, integrating this into education as well is critical, because it's happening so fast that the next generations are already have accepted it and as a given.
Yes, yes, exactly. My little kids use the iPad, use the iWatch like experts, and really we are heading somewhere we should know much more about. We are behind in this part of the world, obviously, discussing these things and raising red flags or green flags. These are issues that should be discussed. But I think one of the very important protective measures, if you wish, is re-inculcating the humanities in the life of every person. Art, painting, reading, music, culture. This is what makes us human beings. Lately, you know, in Lebanon, particularly Diana, anyone who goes into a literary course of study is frowned upon. He must be unintelligent, or she's probably stupid or not clever. But that's not true. It is an indirect way of introducing a generation of algorithms. So we need to go back to what makes us humans.
I agree.
Thalia, can I ask a question, please?
Hello, Marianne.
Hi. Thank you for an amazing, and as Diana mentioned, very eye-opening. And actually, I've been just thinking about what you presented and the impact it's going to have or having right now on medicine when we are trying to teach the medical students about being humane, about being there for the patient, about listening to the patient. Where are we heading? So the question is, how quickly are we going to introduce it at AUB into our education program? And I think, as you said, it's way ahead of us. So we cannot wait too long before we bring awareness of our students into that, and how it cannot take over their being humane and being there for the patient. This is scaring me.
I totally agree with you. One way of introducing it, or at least opening the gate, was this webinar. But I think, and you are a member of the Medical Center Ethics Committee, I think it is incumbent on us. We have a moral obligation to come up with a recommendation. Although we did suggest that a few years back when there was a women and data science meeting, we did have a white paper talking about the importance of integrating all this in medical school. But I think we can go ahead and talk about it again with the medical education team, and I think they are open for it.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Marianne. Well,
So
I hope I didn't depress you, but at least probably I'm going to leave you with some thoughts to ponder.
oh, definitely.
And how? Yeah.
So if we don't have any more questions or comments,
Can I ask very quickly? This is not a question. This is highly commending Dr. Arawi for bringing on these issues and keeping them alive in our mind. I have to tell you, I'm scared. Knowing that people are thinking about it and factoring in these issues and the ethical issues that they arise reassures me somehow. Thalia, you played Beethoven's 10th Symphony for 1 minute. Was it only me who couldn't hear it, or did I have a sound problem, or everybody else could not hear it as well?
Didn't hear it either.
Did you hear it?
I could not hear it either.
Ah, okay. So,
Thalia, I have one final question for you.
yes, but I just want to say thank you to Dr. Habib for her nice comments, really. And if you'd like to hear the symphony, I can send it to you by email.
Yes,
no problem.
please. I'm very curious. Yes, yes, please. Thank you.
Dr. Laher?
So do you think these devices will have prescribing powers? and how is that going to be regulated? Because I think that's going to be a big rabbit hole, which I think could lead to all sorts of issues. Because who's going to then take care of the side effects or unwanted effects of prescribing powers given to the AI machines?
So the first part of your question, whether they will have prescribing powers, they already started. In certain countries, they already started having these indirect prescribing powers. And to a lesser extent, you have these systems that actually warn the doctor when a dosage is beyond limit or when a medication interacts with another medication. But also this will affect eventually the way the doctor thinks, because it's like when we used to use the dictionary, it was tough, but it really made us think. Now we just click on Google and we get all the information that we want. Same thing for mathematics. We used to do all this math when we were children, and now all of a sudden we have these fancy calculators and what have you, and the phones. So yes, they are there. The one major negative effect they will have is that they will change the way the brain thinks when it comes to physicians and medicine. Who is going to hold them accountable? What is the role of the pharmaceutical industry? These are also big questions. For example, we all know that there are certain places and certain physicians who contract with the pharmaceutical companies, and the more they prescribe from their medication, the more advantage or trips or financial gain they will have. And this can very easily be implemented into an AI. So big questions. I can't pretend I can answer all of them, but it's something that we definitely need to ponder as we move on day after day. And yes, thank you, Dr. Arja. The Path to Integrity link is a very important link. I really recommend everyone to see it.
Thank you, Doctor, for the rich discussion and answering all of these questions. I think if we don't want to delay our guests any longer, if no one has any more questions or comments, we can wrap up.
You're the boss. Okay, I guess.
Yes. I
Thank
think
you,
we
everyone.
can wrap up for the evening. Thank you so much, Doctor, and thank you for the thought-provoking presentation as usual, and the questions and discussions. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope to see you with us again.
Inshallah. Thank you very much for the very interesting questions. I'm leaving this forum thinking even more about this. So thanks a lot, and see you soon, inshallah. Have a good night, everyone. Good day.
Thank
you. Thank you very much.